I got a deep dive into a chemistry paper today to talk about. This is from our friends at Abstracts, Ian Oswald and company. I think Ian's watching. So, hey, Ian, how are you? Covering your paper. So, the title of the paper was published this week in ACS Omega, which is their rapid, quick-fire, important stuff to get out into the world, and it's entitled "Non-Terpenoid Chemical Diversity of Cannabis Phenotypes Predicts Differentiated Aroma Characteristics," and this is more of their follow-up work from the previously published work, where they're looking at these volatile sulfur components and indoles and other anthranilic esters and things like that that are not terpenes, right? And so I think this is an extremely important contribution. And Ian, I get jealous when I see a paper that's got 11 authors on it. I wish I had 10 scientists to collaborate with, although I noticed that one of the authors here is none other than Brad Melshanker himself from 710. So who would have ever guessed that? Yeah, who would have ever guessed that Melshanker would have made it into a scientific publication as a contributing author? But shout out to a friend, Brad.
Yes.
Okay, so the abstract reads, well, I think the reason why Brad was included is because, and Brad and Ian are both from 710 that are on the author line here, is that they looked at 5 different phenotypes of one particular strain, Strawberry 36, which I think might be a proprietary strain to 710. I'm not sure. Jason, you might know that. Have you heard of the Strawberry 36 strain? I'm not familiar with that. But, you know, they were basically looking at phenohunting. And when you're doing phenohunting, you're going through your grow and you're mostly looking for physical characteristics within the plant, you know, different shape of leaf or different clustering of the buds or just different physical manifestations in the plant itself. But that type of phenohunting only goes so far. These guys are now doing in-depth chemical analysis to look at the chemical makeup of what's, in this case, what they did is they looked at 5 different phenotypes of that Starburst 36 strain. And they looked at ice water hash samples. So I would take it that, you know, I mean, those guys over at 710 have things dialed in. So I'm sure this is high quality, full melt material without any fats, waxes, or lipids. I'm sure it's just heads. So they looked at 5 different samples of 5 different phenotypes and got very, very different results in looking at this in-depth chemical analysis. But what was really interesting is that the terpene profiles between the 5 different phenotypes were remarkably conserved. So there's not too much difference in the terpene profiles, but certainly a big, profound difference in the aroma of the herb itself. So let me read the abstract. The recent increase in legality of cannabis sativa L has led to interest in developing new varieties with unique aromatic or effect-driven traits. Selectively breeding plants for the genetic stability and consistency of their secondary metabolite profile. So the cannabinoids and the terpenes, those are what we call secondary metabolites. So in order to stabilize that profile, one application is what's called phenotyping, where you basically go and identify a certain phenotype within a particular strain you're looking at. While this horticultural process used extensively in the cannabis industry, few studies exist examining the chemical data that may differentiate phenotypes aromatically. To gain insight into the diversity of the secondary metabolite profiles between progeny, we analyzed 5 different ice water hash rosin samples. So they were rosin too. That's very interesting. It wasn't just ice water hash. They actually then took the ice water hash and pressed it into rosin. So certainly there could be some change of the secondary metabolite profile in that process itself. So we analyzed 5 ice water hash rosin samples created from 5 different prototypes of the same crossing using a comprehensive 2-dimensional gas chromatography coupled with time-of-flight mass spectrometry, flame ionization detection, and sulfur chemiluminescence detection. So these are all the different methods that they're using once they do a gas chromatograph, and they're doing a 2-dimensional gas chromatograph, which is doing a gas chromatograph on a gas chromatograph. So it's really getting an efficient separation. And using this sulfur chemiluminescence detection, they can detect things at very, very small amounts. So these results were then correlated with results from a human sensory panel. So they had a human sensory panel evaluate these 5 different types of water hash, and they found aroma differences between certain phenotypes that are driven by key mono or key non-terpenoid compounds. So it wasn't the terpenes that made these things different. It was these other compounds, including the newly reported 3-mercaptohexylhexanoate. Well, let's see. I tried to draw a picture of this on the board, but here I drew a picture here. Maybe can we see that? See, okay, that's the compound. 3-mercaptohexylhexanoate. So it's a sulfur-containing ester that is from 2-mercaptohexanol, which I think they previously identified as part of this entourage of sulfur-containing compounds that really have very profound impacts on the aromas. And in this paper, they further identify octanoic and decanoic acids. I did another drawing of these. So here's the octanoic and decanoic acids. What you can see with decanoic acid in particular is that you can make several different isomers. So while they're identifying the molecular weight that corresponds to octanoic and decanoic acid, they depict the what are called the normal isomers in the abstract. But I think at the level they're detecting, I don't think they've actually discerned whether they have branching, because they could have isomers, and there could be essentially a multitude of different decanoic and octanoic acids in there. So I think this is a very, very important study. I think what this shows, again, is that when you're doing phenotyping and you're trying to get a certain aroma in cannabis, you can look at terpene profiles all you want. You really need to dig into the next level of chemical diversity in cannabis, which are these flavorant molecules, which are so potent that they're only there in very, very trace quantities. Just kind of like the butane thiol that they put into natural gas to flavor it, so you know if you leave a gas burner on, you can smell natural gas. Well, actually, natural gas has no smell at all, but they add these sulfur compounds as odorants to natural gas, so you'd smell if you left gas on. So I think another interesting tidbit I picked up from this paper is that it's been recently described that D-limonene and linalool can contribute to citral and floral notes in cannabis that are not typically associated with tropical citrus flavors. And what was very interesting here is that what was not expected is that D-limonene has been the predominant terpene in varieties such as GMO, right, which is a very dank, very gassy, garlicky kind of strain. But those types of strains don't really have much of a citrusy odor at all. So if limonene is responsible for making the fruity and citrus, why isn't GMO more fruity or citrus, and it's more garlicky? So I think what it says is that these trace compounds, like these volatile sulfur compounds or this octanoic and decanoic acid, are basically more overpowering over the floral and citrusy terpenes to give GMO its really distinct kind of gassy kind of flavor. So I think, yeah, it's a very important study that illustrates why we need talented scientists and chemists and people who really want to dig into the details and work in labs to try to identify and tease out some of the molecules in the plant that are basically responsible. So if you're looking to do plant breeding and you're looking to do phenotyping or phenohunting, you should pay attention to this paper, because I think this paper is going to tell you that looking at terpene profiles alone doesn't tell the entire story. You really got to do the in-depth chemical analysis. And Ian, this is a wonderful piece of work. You guys are doing just such a great job there. I love reading these papers because I learn an incredible amount of information from them. And yeah, that's what I have to say about this paper. Very important paper. It might be over the head of most of our audience, but I think for people who really like to understand what gives cannabis its aroma and its essence, this story here is front and center. So that's the story today from the halls here of Shiré Hall at St. Michael's College in Colchester, Vermont. I'd be interested in what you guys have to say about this paper.
Correct me if I'm wrong. This is like the cheese aroma that people
yeah, so what they found in the cheese kind of varieties is that the octanoic and the decanoic acid and the indoles like scatol, which is actually is an indole that really brings the essence of feces, if there is such a term. But certainly you've smelled weed before where you're like, hey, did somebody just step in dog shit or something? I mean, so there is a real, correlation to humans and the way that we sense and the way that we're able to determine different aromas. And certainly some people would not want that in their cannabis. I know that my wife likes the very fruity, berry, citrusy flavors. Give me the gas. I don't want the gas. I want it all day long. And so I pay attention to these kinds of molecules, and maybe we'll actually see someday testing labs actually doing routine testing of these sulfur-containing components. They would need to have the sulfur chemiluminescence detector, which costs a lot of money, but if the market requires that, that's how these guys are able to basically put a gas score on herb and concentrates, and I think that's really cool. Because I love the gas, meaty gas.
Yeah. Well,
another thing I've been reading about, and I'd love to hear you explain it, Dr. Mark, is how stereoisomers of the same terpenes can cause totally different smells.
Yeah, they certainly can. So there's two different kinds of pinene. There's beta pinene and there's alpha pinene. With limonene, there's D-limonene and there's L-limonene.
And it's basically a stereoisomer is like a mirror image of the molecule structure, right?
It can be, or it could be just what it could be, Matt. Is it could be a molecule with the same building blocks, but just in a different way. Those are kind of like isomers, and so like. Yeah, our nose and our sensory system has developed enough sophistication that we can tell one isomer of carvone, which will smell minty, spearminty, and the other isomer of carvone, which has got the essence of caraway seed, which will smell like rye bread. So rye bread does not smell like spearmint. So again, our nose is significantly developed the ability over the time course of evolution to basically distinguish between different fragrances like that. And it could just be a stereoisomer like that, or it could be a completely different molecule. The thing that I love here is that if you look at this molecule, this mercapto molecule, the point that you bring up, Matthew, is very important, because this SH carbon bond here is got both R and S configuration. So that means there is a right-handed molecule and a left-handed molecule. And you would think that our nose is significantly sophisticated enough to be able to tell the right-handed molecule from the left-handed molecule. But there's still that remains to be seen. I reached out to Ian specifically about the chirality at that carbon, and he said, it remains to be seen whether the natural compound is the right-handed or the left-handed, but it's likely that our nose would be able to tell the difference between the two. So, great point.
Adam, do you have that picture? We have that picture queued up. I have this picture I want to share with you guys. Since we're talking about cheese, we do want to pay some homage to the creator of the breeder of the cheese weed. And in this picture is myself, Big Buddha, and Kay of Trichome Technologies, who is a big innovator in this space. I mean, this guy is a legend, and he had a 60 Minutes special on growing cannabis in the 80s.
Wow.
Okay.
Shout out to the original.
Yeah, and so shout out to Kay.
He will make the claim that he was the first one to isolate cannabis terpenes from raw cannabis. And at the Cannabis Cup in 2014, he showed me a little vial of some terpenes, and he says, "Mark, you'll never guess what's in here." And I was like, well, just give me a sample and I'll run it my instrumentation. I'll tell you exactly what's in there.
Yeah, right.
He didn't like to hear that.
Oh man, but it was funny because when we took this picture, we were walking through the streets of Washington D.C. and Kay is like, you know what I have to do while we're out here, Jason? I said, what's that? He said, I have to take the Pablo Escobar picture. I said, what, the Pablo Escobar picture? He said, yeah. He said, when Pablo Escobar came to the United States one time, he said he went to the White House and got as close to the White House as he could get and took a picture, and he showed me the picture. And then he wanted to recreate that, and we got to be able to recreate that picture with Kay and with Big Buddha. And so rest in peace, Big Buddha, the breeder of the cheese. And it's great to see the work that Abstracts is doing in regards with the research in regards with this cheese aroma.